Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Matthew Mumbles. My name is Matthew, and on this podcast show, we pretty much talk about whatever I want to talk about. It could be my life moments, it could be my life stories, things I'm interested in, things that are happening in the world right now, etc., etc. Today's topic, I want to talk about an old topic I haven't really discussed on the channel in quite some time. Godzilla versus GameGodzilla, or GVGG, as some of you guys may know it as abbreviated. I have not touched upon this because, well, there was really no reason for me to talk about it. Because for a few years now, it's been kind of dormant. It's been like the movies I'm talking about, not the character from Mumbles and Godzilla. That's its own thing. The Mumbles Godzilla show has like its own continuity, and Godzilla vs. GameGodzilla does exist within the T.O.S.G universe, but they're like acted within the T.O.S.G universe. You know, Godzilla and GameGodzilla, they portray these characters and then they put it out for movies. It's basically the same thing as like Toy Story and Lightyear. Toy Story is its own universe, and Lightyear is a movie that exists in their universe and ours. It's the same exact way with the Mumbles Godzilla show and the Godzilla vs. GameGodzilla. But that's besides the point. I want to talk about Godzilla vs. GameGodzilla as its own project, adds its own merit, but aside from the Mumbles Godzilla show. This all being said, I'm going to kind of dive into the production history and how I eventually made the first film, and then the second, the scrap third, and then the reboot, or well, the then reboot, which is Evolution, and then we'll touch upon it, which I know some of you guys would want to hear, the Godzilla vs. GameGodzilla reboot I'm currently producing. So, for the first film, man, 2016. What a year that was. Tons of new projects for the channel, tons of new stuff. It was basically the start of a new era in my life, and where I was really on the grind with creativity. Godzilla vs. GameGodzilla was easily it was my first film of I know it's not a film length, but it's the first project I considered a film. Episodes are a different thing. You could literally group it as a short film, but by that logic, I'd have over 1,000 short films. Pretty interesting, huh? But that being said, Godzilla vs. GameGodzilla was my first movie, and it was 3 parts, I believe. And three of them were about 5 minutes or so in length. I had no experience with film whatsoever, so I just got a bunch of characters, got the Godzillas, thought of a story, made the set, and just winged it. The film didn't even really go through that much editing. What was raw footage was final footage, at least in my opinion. So I place these dudes that are exploring an abandoned train yard when GameGodzilla attacks. Then I put Godzilla in there to come and save the day, and you might notice I made them talk. The reason I did this was to give them a bit more personality compared to what you see in the films. Because I feel okay, if you're just going to if you want to have Godzilla give him a personality, why not just make him talk, is what I thought initially. Because I worked it with Tavius, why couldn't I work it with this? But no, that didn't really go well. I think the talking execution was really forced in and should have not been in it. I really just did not like the feel of it. At least looking back. Then I thought it was fine. I liked the idea of making Godzilla talk. Nowadays, not so much. That'd just be weird. That'd be like if you're watching, say, Godzilla 2014 on the biggest IMAX cinema, and he goes to do that big roar, with Ford Brody. He's looking up at Godzilla in uniform and everything, and Godzilla just looks down back at him and goes raw, and then just does that big scream for 10 seconds, I think. Instead of that, it's just his morning yawn, and that was a real yawn, by the way. And he just kind of casually fights the Muto, and then just kind of start. Okay, I've dragged that out for far too long, but that's what we do. We ramble. That film I released in 3 parts, and then eventually I released a full cut of it. This film, I definitely don't think is the greatest in terms of quality. In fact, I may release a director's cut. Not guaranteed. I may. Along came the sequel later that year, Godzilla vs. GameGodzilla 2, where I introduced, I think, the same characters. It's been a long time since I even seen the movies. But I remember this was where I put on the Angry Birds suits. Okay, but really, the real reason though this film had the Angry Birds suits wasn't because I liked Angry Birds. The real reason was because while I was filming it, I lost the figures. You know, the little human figures that I was filming with? I lost them. So what happened was, I decided, okay, why don't I just cut frame and make the excuse that they're in Angry Birds costumes? That was a pretty cheesy moment myself, if I do say so myself. Like, I hate that. I honestly hated that, looking back. But I had to do it, otherwise the film wouldn't have been made. Probably the film never should have been made, but still, that's besides the point. Godzilla vs. GameGodzilla 2 was more or less the same thing. It was good for what it was, minus Angry Birds suits. But I overall think that it was at least fun to do for what it was then. Next, we go into Godzilla vs. GameGodzilla 3, which was the only canceled movie I've ever made. The reason why I never finished this one, honestly, was just due to motivation. At least I remember it being motivation. There's a lot of projects that I'd put on the side burners and are coming back to, so who knows, maybe I might come back to this one. Only to finish it. I don't think I'd be, like, fully remaking it, plus I'm making the reboot. Not as we speak, but, like, occasionally here and there I'll go back to it because I've got more projects on the table right now, so we'll talk about that in a sec. The third film only had its first part released. And, again, I don't remember what, but I remember there was going to be a new Godzilla. I was going to use the Bandai Creations Fusion Series Godzilla 2000 in this and name him Super Godzilla before, or like around the same time I was doing Godzilla Reborn, which also never happened. But, you know, this was all going to be like a very big, this was going to be the end, hopefully, of the trilogy. But unfortunately, again, due to lack of motivation, I'm assuming it just never happened. And again, I understand that I don't like projects being half done, but that's kind of what it was left to do. Years later, well, probably not years later. Let me check the date again. Sorry, I just have to check the date itself. Rolling onto my channel page. Like, the thing about Godzilla vs. GameGodzilla is that it was supposed to end with the third movie. I knew this from, like, years ago. I knew it from, like, the first movie, like, if I were to do more than, yeah, Godzilla vs. GameGodzilla, the reboot, or I named it now Evolution to differentiate itself, released in 2017. This one, in my opinion, was just way too based off Shin Godzilla. I put little mini Godzillas that made them like change throughout the movie. It happened with both Godzilla and GameGodzilla. Aside from that, it was basically the same movie. You know, it was just too Shin Godzilla inspired. What's weird is that I didn't like the idea of it involving Godzilla at the time. So why did I do it? Because Shin Godzilla did it. I strayed way too far from my own creativity and just implemented Shin Godzilla Evolution and called it a new movie. Which is why I named it later Evolution. To differentiate from the original and the second film. That also being said, I also at one point planned a Godzilla vs. GameGodzilla reboot a few years back. I remember it being titled Godzilla X GameGodzilla. Again, I'm going to have to look again. Godzilla X Game Godzilla was supposed to be like, oh, it was called Godzilla X Game Godzilla Battle of the Kings. This film never got made. Again, motivation. I think at this point I was just giving up on the Godzilla vs. Game Godzilla series and instead mainly for focusing on Tabgus. Honestly, I think that was a pretty good choice because had I not continued, or had I continued versus Game Godzilla, it just would have been getting movie after movie after movie, pointless reboots. And it's ultimately to the point where it just doesn't, how should I say this? It doesn't become quality anymore. It just becomes quantity. Even though I was relatively much younger than I am now, back then, you know, because that was like 2017, 18, you know, I still, like, there was just not much motivation to be thrown around with GVGG. However, all of that changed about a year ago. I announced that I would be producing a Godzilla vs. Game Godzilla reboot, as I felt like the first films of the Godzilla vs. Game Godzilla series, plus the scrapped movies I did, both Godzilla vs. Game Godzilla and non-Godzilla vs. Game Godzilla movies, like Legendary vs. Toho Worlds Collide and Reborn, those had some good ideas. So, I thought, what if I took Godzilla vs. Game Godzilla and all my scrapped Godzilla films and merged them all into one? This is where I'm going to start giving you guys a bit of an update. Godzilla vs. Game Godzilla's reboot is officially titled Godzilla Monster Against Monster, an obvious throwback to Godzilla Monster of Monsters. Now, if you guys have not seen, I posted a poster. Actually, do I have it? I think I have the website, my poster on my website. It'll link on my About Me page. But it's officially titled that. And the reason why I'm making this film, I want to make this film as one note as I possibly can. Now, what I mean by one note is that I want this to be a standalone movie. I want this to have all of the ideas that I merge, or at least as most as I can fit in primarily, into one film. I like sci-fi. I like drama. I like a little bit of horror. I like action. I like a bit of comedy. So on and so forth. And all the other films had so much different ideas. So I'm making this film to hopefully, bring in all those ideas together. Now, what stage in production am I at? Currently, right now, it's still in the writing phase, which it's going to take a long time before we actually get into any other work for the movie, primarily because I'm also busy with Golden Glory, the movie, which is my current film project. I don't want to create, more spin-offs. I don't want to create any sequels, prequels. I want this to be one coherent, closed-off, standalone movie. And it will be my last Godzilla fan film, or Godzilla film in general. The reason why is because I just feel like I'm kind of done making Godzilla movies. All my movies have been nothing but Godzilla related. Godzilla vs. Game Godzilla 1, 2, 54 vs. 2014, Evolution, the 6 Angry vs. Godzilla movies, and this upcoming one. That's 11 Godzilla movies that I have made on my own accords. Scratch that. There's 3 more. The Derpy Godzilla movies. Yes, I'm willing to count those. And the Game Godzilla. I just added it all up. Didn't I? Yeah, look. I'm kind of done making Godzilla films. I like the idea, but I think I'm done. I'd rather do original films, which is why I've had more fun making stuff that's based on my creations. For example, the Golden Glory movie. That's based on my own show, my own characters, my own jokes, my own storylines, everything. Not everything, but mostly everything. That being said, as for like a release date for Godzilla Monster Against Monster, I'm having a pretty hard time deciding that. It could be as early as late 24. It could be as late as 2026. I want to make this movie the biggest, best project I have ever conceived, I've ever made. I want to pour my heart and soul, not, okay, I'm going a bit overboard. I want to put as much effort as I can in this movie. Here's the thing. That would ultimately mean budgeting, which for the first time ever, I'd have to get a budget, which is easier said than done. Now, am I starting a Kickstarter for this? No. I'm going to do this on my own accords. I'm going to hire the right people to help me. Voice actors, potentially artists, editors, potentially. This is all potential. I do not know if this is going to happen. The reboot will happen. I just don't know if it's going to happen in this specific way. I have a lot of envisions. I've been doing this for years on my own accords, and whenever I do bring in someone else, it's voluntarily based. This movie, I'm hoping, will be one of the first projects I do that's not just voluntarily based. I believe people should be paid for what they do, and this film hopefully will be start of that for my own projects. But again, that's like in the far future, within the next few years. I don't know what's going to happen then. I don't know if this film will... Okay, as long as I'm producing this, I hope it's going to be done. It's going to be a long way, but at the end of the day, there's a lot that needs to be done for Godzilla Monster Against Monsters. It's going to be a road, so might as well subscribe and click that like button to see. Anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching this or listening to this very long podcast. It was a bit longer than I expected, but hey, I just have to ramble. But that's what we do. We ramble. It's called Matthew Mumbles for a reason. That being said, guys, thank you guys for listening to this episode. If you guys liked it, definitely subscribe to the channel. Believe in Jesus and spread the gospel. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out, everyone.